online meeting MAP-wide using Zoom technology. My name is Charlie Villaseñor, and I am the chairman of the MAP Trade, Investments, and Tourism Committee. I'm also the CEO of the Procurement and Supply Institute of Asia and CEO of TransProcure Corporation. The MAP Trade, Investments, and Tourism Committee is the organizer for this webinar. Kindly settle down comfortably. We will now begin our program. Let's pause for a while, and may I request everyone to bow your heads for a short prayer. Almighty God, in your mercy and compassion, forgive our sins. Thank you, Lord Almighty, for keeping us safe, healthy, and for enabling us to be with our fellow MAP members in this online gathering. Give our speakers the wisdom, the good health, so that they can pursue their respective advocacies in nation building. Bless our local leaders so they can attend to the needs of their constituents in these trying times. Protect our frontliners, especially our doctors, nurses, policemen, military, supply chain and logistics professionals, and those whose service are needed during the lockdown. Please protect all of us from COVID-19 and give us hope and comfort to face all other tragedies and calamities. Lord, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Let us now place our right hand on our chest and join us with the Philippine National Anthem. Thank you. At this point, may I request no other than the President of MAP, who is the Senior Partner and ex-com member of Accra Law, our beloved Attorney Francis Lim, to deliver the welcome remarks. Over to you, Francis.
Thank you, Charlie. Good morning, everyone. I hope you and your families are all safe and healthy while we are all on a lockdown under the government's ECQ directive. On behalf of the MAP Board of Governors, I welcome all of you to this very first online MAP event. Many thanks to MIT Chair Charlie Villaseñor and Governor-in-Charge Marivic Españo and her staff, led by Arnold, for putting together this first MAP webinar, whose title is Responding to COVID-19 in Just a Matter of 4 Days. Conducting MAP events online is the way to go, not just during the lockdown, but maybe the next few months. By way of updating you, we have also created a MAP community for COVID-19 Viber group. As of this morning, we already have 526 MAP members on board. We're impressed by the response, and we hope that our members will use that platform responsibly in sharing the recommendations and insights in helping us and the country address the problems caused by COVID-19 pandemic. A friendly reminder though, please do your fact check before sending anything. Always think before you click, please. Earlier, we've also created a Google Drive containing government issuances and circulars and other pertinent information on COVID-19, which MAP members can access anytime. Thank you, especially to our speakers, Third LIBREA of PNA Grand Thornton, MAP member JJ Moreno of the Metro Paisano Group, and MAP Past President Joey Bermudez will be speaking from Toronto, Canada. I know it's about 10 o'clock there, Joey, and thank you very much for taking time for me. Let us all learn from your experiences and insights to help us and our businesses address the problems caused by COVID-19. We're conducting this webinar under the MAP Academy, which serves as the umbrella brand for MAP activities that address continuing education needs of folks. We're planning to have a continuing series of webinars on COVID-19. In fact, just this morning, I asked past Governor Carol Dominguez for the Academy to arrange one on managing cash flow during COVID-19 crisis. Likewise, may I also mention that your board has approved a collaboration with PASIA in providing assistance to the government and addressing current problems in the area of supply chain management. As you also know, I've been updating the membership of what MAP has been doing in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We will continue to do so. And in this regard, please do not forget to regularly refer to the MAP, which is our weekly electronic newsletter, regular updates on activities. In closing, stay safe and keep fit and healthy. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay ang MAP.
Thank you very much, Francis. May I now request our Governor in charge of MAP Trade, Investments, and Tourism Committee and the Chairwoman and CEO of the PNA Grand Thornton, Ms. Marivic Españo, to give us an overview of what we expect from today's webinar. Over to you, Marivic.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the MAP Trade, Investments, and Tourism Committee, I would like to thank our speakers for accommodating us for this webinar that is envisioned to enlighten all of us on how we should respond to COVID-19. With the rapidly growing impact of COVID-19, all industries will face significant disruption to their supply chain, workforce, and cash flow. It is therefore critical that organizations understand now their unique risks and circumstances in order to navigate the current environment. Everything is fluid, and therefore businesses need to be agile and alert as the situation evolves. But where do we start? What areas should CEOs like us and our leadership team look into? Our committee organized a webinar to enable MAP members to learn about the strategies and tools that they can use to understand the impact of COVID-19 on their businesses so they can appropriately respond and keep moving forward. We are very fortunate to have with us this morning 3 gentlemen with several years of experience in business: Mr. Emilio LIBREA, Mr. Juan Jonathan JJ Moreno, and Mr. Joey Bermudez. And of course, we have the chairman of the MAP Committee on Trade, Investments, and Tourism, Mr. Charlie Villaseñor, to moderate the discussions. In line with the MAP policy, we will dispense with a lengthy introduction of our speakers. Just an overview of the discussions for this morning. Mr. LIBREA, our third, will present a framework on resilience, especially in managing cash flow. He will talk about what kind of decisions should be made in relation to our customers, supply chain, and our people. JJ will talk about how they in the retail sector are responding to the challenges they face concerning their employees, supply chain, and financial bottom line. He will also present how his organization is reducing execution complexity and resolving conflicting policies. He will also share the new strategies in adapting to the new world, new channels, and new consumer requirements. Joey will share with us his assessment on the impact of the pandemic on SMEs in the Philippines and other countries, making a brief comparison of the effects on SMEs of the COVID-19 tragedy vis-a-vis the damage wrought by the 1997 and 2008 crisis. He will also present insights on what many SMEs are doing to survive this crisis, preserve their enterprise value, and prepare themselves for the post-COVID era. We certainly have an interesting session ahead of us, and I know that you are all excited. I can see from the screen right now that we have 88 participants online. I know that some more will be catching up. And this is certainly a good number given that this is our first webinar in MAP. Some last reminders before we start the discussions. I just want to emphasize the following important house rules. Number one, please remember to mute your speakers to block off the background noise. Members of the MAP Secretariat who are also with us in this call will do that for you in case you forget to press the mute button. Number two, remember to turn off your camera or video for better audio quality. Three, given the limited time that we have, we apologize that we cannot entertain direct verbal questions from the participants. Please submit your questions through the Q&A button that you see on your screen. With the assistance of the MAP Secretariat, Charlie will read the questions on your behalf. Number four, for your information as a webinar participant, you will only be able to see the speaker and their presentations. And lastly, at any point during this webinar, in case you lose connection, just click the link given to you earlier by the MAP Secretariat and you will be able to catch up. So I think we're quite good in using this technology. Let's get the ball rolling now, and let me turn back the mic to Charlie.
And we will turn this thing over now to him. Please go ahead, guys.
I think third, you can now start.
Third, you ready?
Sorry, my apologies. I was on mute. Good morning, everyone. Let me just prepare my presentation. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to MAP for considering me for your first online event, which seems to be a very successful one, given that so many participants are joining. My discussion today, as Marivic mentioned, will be a framework for how businesses can manage crises. In Grant Thornton, we call this the resilience wheel. Okay, so it's a general purpose framework that's intended for all types of businesses. Of course, individual, very specialized kinds of businesses might have different ways of dealing with this crisis. But again, please just take that in consideration that this is a general purpose framework. Resilience is the ability of an organization, from a business perspective, of an organization to survive, you know, in a crisis and to bounce back after the crisis. So hopefully I'll be able to give you some insights on what areas you need to look at and what you need to do, you know, to manage this situation that we are all in at the moment. Okay, so the resilience wheel, at the center of the resilience wheel is robust cash flow management. Okay, so the reason why it's cash flow management is because, as I mentioned, resilience is about survival. And if we're talking about businesses, the end of survival is bankruptcy. So obviously liquidity is the key in dealing with this crisis. And a lot of the decisions that you will be making, short term, medium term, will depend on how liquid you are. So the first thing you need to do really is to assess your cash on hand, the credit that you can draw against, right? And then you have to prepare cash flows that are quite robust, no? So that you, and it has to be rigorously updated. So the cash flow forecast that you prepare will give you a better data on how to deal with this crisis and what decisions that you can make. Now, whether it's for employees or for suppliers, for your supply chain, or your creditors might ask for it. You know? So if you don't have any existing drawdown facilities and you're trying to approach a bank, you know, by showing robust cash flows, that will help. So we don't know, everything is very fluid at the moment. You may have a lot of cash now, but that may change very quickly. So your ability to manage cash is very critical at this point in time. So that's the center of the resilience wheel. And around it are, of course, the areas that impact cash flow in the short term. And then at the same time, you have to consider bigger things. No? So I'll go through each one in turn. And surrounding all this, of course, is very critical, is how you engage with all the stakeholders that are at this time. Okay, so some strategies that you can immediately implement to protect and preserve cash. Of course, number one is stretching supplier payments if you can. No? So whatever it is, no, deferred payment terms, anything. So I think now a lot of suppliers have been helping out each other and have been giving concessions, you know, in relation to the situation. Of course, every supplier is in a different situation, and really your negotiation skills and the negotiation skills of your people would become very important at this time. Negotiate payment deferrals with landlords, with banks. It's good that the DOF has finally issued an IRR yesterday on commercial loans, and that indeed commercial loans are covered by the moratorium. So that helps. If you have idle cash, maybe you should sweep all that into your working capital account right now, because you might need the money at a quick notice. Negotiate with customers to pay early. And if you can offer discounts or other concessions. The government has been releasing a lot of communications about relief. So DIR, SEC, DOLE, DOF, DSP, so a lot of issuances have been released in the past few days and weeks. Please pay attention to all of that, because a lot of these reliefs are intended to help us with our cash flow. Lastly, you may have insurance coverage for this situation. So for instance, things like canceled projects, possibly, you might be covered. Find out if you can make any successful claims at this time. Okay, so that's for cash, immediate cash strategies. What are the areas that impact short-term cash flow? So these matters, these 6 items are really those things that a lot of us have been very preoccupied with in the last 2 weeks. So, and the decisions that you make around these areas will have immediate effect on your cash flow. So for instance, on workforce availability, obviously this is the very big issue, no? At this point. All of these are very important issues, but a lot of companies in the past 2 weeks have suddenly been forced, to work with limited staff, right? So what needed to change if your available workforce was suddenly reduced? 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I was receiving inquiries from clients and friends, strange, unusual questions like they were asking me if I had 900 available laptops that I could lend. So obviously I didn't have that, no? But those were the kinds of questions that and possibilities that companies were looking at to deal with this situation. Fall in demand, obviously. If you're in an industry that is not allowed to operate at this time, if you're B2C, what are you going to do? There is a sudden and drastic fall in demand. So what are you going to do, right? Some companies have had to change how they deal with things. For instance, if you go to supermarkets now, you will see frozen Jollibee Chicken Joy on shelves. So that is a response, obviously, to the fact that a lot of their stores had to close. Supply distribution chain issues. What steps can be taken to mitigate supply or distribution chain interruption? So suddenly your logistics provider is swamped, and let's say your logistics provider is suddenly taking orders from other companies who are paying more. Okay, so what are you going to do in that situation? What are you going to do with all the roadblocks that are affecting the chain? Strategy shift. This one, you might have projects going on right now that are related to your strategy and you might need to make quick decisions now in relation to the situation. So what's going to happen to your big digital transformation project, right? Are you going to stop it or are you going to accelerate it, right? What's going to happen to your strategy of expanding storefronts, right? Let's say you're in the middle of all these initiatives. What are you going to do? So that can help. The decisions that you make there can immediately contribute to your cash flow. To your cash flow. Do you know your cash situation really? So, do you have any covenant breaches at this point that will make it difficult for you to get further credit? Okay, in terms of collections, if you are expecting collections in April and May, is that really going to happen? Okay, have the relationships, have your account officers, have your salespeople had discussions with customers to find out really the situation and make an assessment? So all that, of course, affects cash flow. And then cash controls. What improvements can you make right now, immediately, to control cash? Okay, so are you going to change approval limits? Okay, are you going to put a freeze on certain kinds of expenses? Right. So these kinds of things you need to decide, or you should have decided on in the last 2 weeks, and will be continually adjusting and revising in the coming weeks as this crisis continues. Okay, the wider considerations are, well, 3 areas. No, there's a lot, but I've selected 3 areas that you can consider. So first is contingency planning, very important. The first 2 weeks was probably responding, right? Responding to the sudden absence of my workforce, right? So that was the first 2-3 weeks. But now it's really time for defining the scenarios, right? So what is the scenario? What are the scenarios? Most probably all of you are thinking, is the lockdown going to be extended? How long is it going to be extended? Right? So these are scenarios. A lot of us do not know the answers to this. But if you define the scenarios and list down what needs to happen. So for instance, now that you have a grapple on your cash flow and your cash situation, right? And you've assessed that you can survive for 2 months, 3 months, whatever it is, for your situation. You define the scenarios, what actions need to happen. So if the lockdown prolongs for another month, okay, what am I going to do? So what am I going to do with regards to my people? What am I going to do there? So you have to list all of that down. You need to define the trigger points. The trigger points are those things that will initiate the actions that you have defined in your scenarios. Okay, so for instance, the lockdown is supposed to end April 12th. Is that correct? April 12th. Okay, so a few days before, okay, is it a trigger point for you if no decision has come from government, 2-3 days before that? So what are you supposed to do? Okay, will that trigger a particular scenario? You really need to consider whether parts or all of your business can be suspended. What are the implications of that? With regards to people, obviously, it's always a very sensitive balance between maintaining employment and business survival. And it's going to be very different per company. But you should identify essential staff, really, and provide support to them to enable them to continue working. Support is a lot of things, and it can be some companies I know are already working on transporting staff from their homes to certain work sites. Some companies have had to pay for internet connections of their employees. Some have had to buy laptops for their employees, things like that. No? So what support is needed to enable them to continue working? Okay. Can you redeploy people where possible? Okay. Is it possible for, instead of having to make that very difficult decision of laying off people, can you redeploy? Right? So can you use people in other areas of the business that it looks like you will suspend? Can you use them for other parts of the business? In terms of absence policies, you have to be very clear. A lot of people now are working from home, and monitoring how they're working and how they're contributing despite the absence is very important. Okay, so you have to be clear about that. What happens when an employee of yours gets sick, right? Catches the disease? What are you going to do? What support are you going to provide? Things like that. At the same time, you need to actively discuss workforce solutions options with your people. If you have unions, if there's a union in your company, you have to be discussing that. Of course, you seek legal counsel's help when making these, when deciding on possible options. And then employees, of course, need to always know where they stand, and they need to trust the messages from their leaders. So the tone of all the messaging that you make at this point is very important. Okay. I've heard stories so I was talking to a client who was in Cambodia, and all their employees had decided to walk out. They decided to walk out and stop work because they did not know how their employer was supporting them. So it wasn't clear. Okay. Obviously, the crisis management team, very important here. Make sure that your crisis management team has representation from key departments. Again, you want to be as wide, as engaged with as many stakeholders as possible. And this also helps you see the blind spots, things that you might not be seeing. Okay, so key departments, representing key stakeholders should be part of your crisis management team. You might need to create hot planning groups for individual problems. For instance, the clarifying absence policies, that might need to be worked on by several people, okay, instead of you alone thinking about that. So create a hot planning group for that. Communicate early, often, and frankly with the team. In the early part of the crisis, 2-3 weeks ago, we had daily meetings in the management team in our firm to discuss. Okay, so I'm almost at the end. Thank you for the reminder. So at the end of all this, right, well, there will be lingering effects from the crisis, but when there will be an end. So I'm sure there will be an end. Okay? And hopefully a lot of us have survived it. But the aftermath and what considerations can you make for the future post-crisis? So things that you need to ask for the future. How will my customers' behavior change? Can my business be less reliant on manual labor and processes? So your digital transformation projects. How can we be more agile? And then of course, how do I minimize my supply chain risk going forward? On people and management, was there something in my organization's culture that affected the way I responded to the crisis? So what was missing in my employees? What competencies were missing that made it difficult? So negotiation skills, IT competencies. For facilities in IT, do we really need this much office space? Are things that you need to ask after this is over? So with a lot of people working from home, did it work for my business? Should we geographically disperse our operations? Did I make the right investments in IT over the years? For finance, that time will be a good time to ask what assets, subsidiaries can I dispose of? Also, what can I buy? How do I integrate my cash cycle better? And then lastly, how were my creditor relationships during the crisis? Was my banker very tough on me during the crisis? And what does it mean going forward? So my 15 minutes are up. Thank you very much for your time. I hope everyone survives this crisis, and I also hope everyone is well at this time. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're back. Thank you very much, Third. To those who have just logged on and joined us on this webinar, welcome everybody. I just wanted to make a mention that we have reached the 100 attendee. So for now, we have participants from MAP of around 107. This is Charlie Villaseñor, just so all of you know who's actually moderating the session. Let's move on to our second speaker. Our second speaker is the Chief Strategy and Governance Officer of Metro Retail Stores Group, the former Principal and Head for Southeast Asia of Palladium Group, the former President and CEO of the Institute of Corporate Directors, or ICD. He was also the former Vice President for Corporate Governance and Risk Management of the Philippine Stock Exchange, or PSE, and co-vice chair of the MAP Corporate Governance Committee. JJ, as some of you know, will make a presentation on ensuring service delivery and reshaping business strategy amidst uncertainty and change. Let us welcome Juan Jonathan JJ DC Moreno. Over to you, JJ.
Thank you very much, Charlie. I may have to request the Secretariat to pull up the slides that I sent out, and I'll just prompt them to change it if you may. Give us a few seconds to do that. All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me here. It certainly is an honor to be part of the first MAP webinar. And this is a presentation that I'm going to be making on behalf of my organization, Metro Retail Stores Group. But this is in no way going to present or intended to present as the best practice. Just as many of us here, we are as an organization struggling with this current pandemic, and this presentation is merely to share our experiences with the hope that some of you would learn from them. Next, please. So basically, the agenda will cover the 3 R's, as I would call it. An identification of the risks that we face as an organization. How are we responding to those risks? And how are we, as we respond to those risks, reshape our strategy moving forward? Next, please. So these are the risks that we face. Next slide, please. There are, when we went into this, we as an organization have a business continuity plan. But admittedly, that BCP plan actually was focused more on disaster resiliency and other events, certain things that you see here. But admittedly, we really did not look into a pandemic as part of our BCP. So we went through this, and as it was evolving and developing in China and in other countries, we saw as an organization the need to develop a BCP that is specific to the COVID-19 or the pandemic, as you see in the lower right hand of the screen. Next, please. So these are the risks that we face. Can you please show the entire slide, please? These are the risk areas. Obviously, the first risk area for us would be our employees. The risks of infection, of transmission, the risk of morale, motivation, the anxieties that our employees face, the safety, their productivity, and access. So these are some of the risk areas that we're seeing. For our customers, it's the same, more or less. It's the infection and transmission in our stores, the trust that they would have on us, safety and security, again, their anxiety, and of course, at the end of the day, we also would like, even if in the context of a pandemic, like to provide a good shopping experience. For the supply chain, obviously, by the way, for those of you who don't know much about Metro Retail, we are a multi-format retailer. We operate supermarkets, hypermarkets, and department stores across Visayas and Luzon, and southern NCR and southern Luzon. So in supply chain, there are challenges and risks on maintaining stock availability, especially on the essential goods. Supplier coordination, there are instances where it's going to be difficult. It is difficult for us to work with our suppliers and vendors. The movement of goods, as you pretty much know, the checkpoints and that thing. So it's a challenge for us as well. And finally, and more importantly as well, would be our financial state. The risks that go into our cash position, the liquidity, the ability for us to manage our costs. We have seen vendors actually demanding shorter payment terms right now, mainly because other competitors, when we compete for the same set of products that we put in our shelves, some of our competitors actually also want to give shorter terms or pay in cash just to be able to secure the supplies. So those are the risks that we are facing right now and we're trying to manage. Next, please. So our response, first, please. Team welfare would be very important for us. People are important. Next. Can you please show everything so that, okay, very good. So these are the focus areas. Of course, there are many other areas we look into and we manage on a day-to-day basis, but these are the top 5 areas where we are focusing our efforts, energies on. First is team welfare. And I'll talk about this in greater detail as I go along this presentation. So it's about team welfare. It's about our ability to deliver on the service. We are, in effect, part of the frontliners. We do have frontliners work in our organization. We have a role in the community that we understand that we need to play. And so we would like to make sure that we deliver the service that is expected of us. As a business, we obviously have to ensure the stability of the organization, and financial resilience is one of them. And more importantly, also in this day and age where there are conflicting signals from all over, we would like to reduce what we would call the execution complexity. We would like those on the forefront to really just focus on delivering on the service and executing on the plans. And then we and the management team are trying to reduce the complexity that surrounds those executions. So next, please. So as I mentioned earlier, we at Metro Retail actually developed a COVID-19 specific business continuity plan. This is on top of our usual business continuity plan. The reason for this is we would like to give focus on our response and management of this particular challenge or pandemic. In that plan would be a clear articulation of policies and directives from a people and leadership standpoint, from identifying manning, what departments will be manned where. That's all spelled out in that BCP. Leadership, communication, the cadence of the communication are also spelled out. In this, the BCP also identifies our supermarket, department store, and hypermarkets, how they would operate, what they would do in the case of an infection, their day-to-day routines and hygiene, and that kind of thing. Supply chain also is pretty much also spelled out in that BCP. Merchandising, how we buy and how we replenish, they're all spelled out, and who will be manning them and where. And then support functions, of course, finance, IT, corporate affairs, investor relations would have also very clear roles to play as articulated in our BCP. We try our best to put up a BCP that would more or less cover what we feel has to be covered, but we continuously learn. We constantly draw insights and generate ideas from international and local publications of reputable organizations. So as we we've already finalized our BCP, we remain to really be mindful of and in the lookout for new ideas, as well as we benchmark our best practices with other companies. So in a way, our COVID-19 BCP is an evolving document that is improved or strengthened as we go along, as we come up with a best practice. Next, please. Okay, in terms of team welfare, as I mentioned earlier, we would like to, of course, reduce the risk of transmission. So the usual things that you see perhaps in the stores, including ours, we would have hygiene and sanitation. We have temperature checks, masks, PPEs for selected employees, communication programs, social distancing, and those things that are really already common. We also have work arrangements. We have divided ourselves into two teams, Team A, Team B, and they have been identified. There are identified multiple work sites, taking advantage of the different stores that we have and warehouses that we have. We have a work from home program. We have travel bans, and we obviously have virtual meetings that are regular. Our policy also includes a clear articulation on supporting those who are PUM, PUI, and the positives. It's quite a lengthy document, but one of the things that I like to highlight is really the importance of, and this is a core component of our BCP, is a safe channel for employees to access and inform, the company of infection or possible infection. Just a hotline of some sort where privacy is ensured. So we felt that there has to be that safe line, the safe channel for people to, even at a slight suspicion of an infection, they have a safe channel to be able to raise that to the organization. And then privacy is ensured. And there is a identified and trained staff that would closely monitor it. And we do not disclose the name again. We understand that it can be very stressful to our people. So we have constant encouragement. We talk to them, their regular daily huddles. We communicate proactively. We are very transparent with them. We provide some little benefits to make it a little bit easier for them. For transportation, we provide for the skeletal staff. We provide housing as well. Because of these lockdowns, our people cannot move in and out of the barangays, and some subsidy on food. And we also ensure, and we really remind our people on the ground to comply with regulatory requirements. So the default is what the local government unit wants, they get. So that the people on the ground, to reduce complexity, the people on the ground do not have to bother about the politics. Let us at the executive team now worry about running political interference and talking to the national government agencies and what have you. Next, please. Okay, in terms of service delivery, we are very clear. This is, while we are a business, we are also a corporate citizen. This is a public service. We have shifted now our mindset into running a business. Of course, that still remains, but we are running the business as a corporate citizen as part of our corporate responsibility. So that is the one that's predominant right now. Having said that, we also need to build a trust with our customers. We want to make our customers feel that they are safe in our stores, although and then manage the inconvenience that they have to go through because of the social distancing and the long lines outside. We endeavor our stores to remain open. All of our stores was open. There was no store, from my recollection, from my understanding, that was closed. So we are even considering opening on Monday, Thursday, just to be able to provide an extra day of service to the people. So it's the service orientation there as well. Appropriately stocking our shelves, special and essential goods, is a function of two things. It's a function of supply availability, and it's a function also of logistics. So we are working very hard, talking to our own connections in national government agencies and local government, to be able to make sure that the stocks that we could secure and supply go to our stores and go to our retail customers. Understandably, there are a lot of institutional clients that come to us and would like to buy practically everything that we have on our shelves. We try to avoid and control that. We still serve institutional clients, but we make sure that our retail clients, the simple families that actually take ours to line up, are also served. Again, I talked about safe, secure, and hygienic shopping place and a pleasant shopping experience. And of course, we adhere to the DTI's price freeze. Next, please. In terms of business stability, we are obviously protecting the top line, but not not revenue at all costs. Meaning, we do understand that there will be a hit on the top line, but then this is a medium to long term journey, if you may. No? So we protect the top line as much as possible, but we, for lack of a better term, moderate the greed. So we also are ensuring a responsive supply chain function, the way we allocate and process the process of allocation for constrained supplies. There have been challenges in supplies, especially in the beginning, with alcohol, with vitamin C, and with other supplies as well. Masks, we do have a pharmacy as well. And understand how inventory buffer changes in various scenarios. So we do some scenario planning as well. And of course, being very aware of where our supply chain vulnerabilities are, in transportation, in people, in warehousing, and that kind of thing. We develop alternatives and contingencies for critical assets of operations and logistics routes. We look at some warehouses and even staff houses for our people. And then we focus obviously on most important customer segments. And as customer segments, this is from a business standpoint, in areas where we could get better margins, and we have loyal customers, and of course what the community needs. And we also are exploring opportunities to partner with other companies to optimize resources and improve service delivery. Logistics companies that we're looking at, delivery companies that we're looking at, and other sourcing companies where we could source supplies from. Next, please. Next, please. Third did a very good job at trying to explain, the from financial resiliency, and this is what we're trying to do. No, it may not be fully in line with it was very third presentation was very. I wish I saw that earlier, and then we could do more. No, but right now we're trying to really manage our cash and liquidity. We're doing cost discipline. We review and delay discretionary spends. We do that. Our CFO is very adamant at that, and as an executive team, we do that as well. We also postpone non-critical capex, capex that would not really have a direct impact. We manage payroll expenses. We are now looking into leave without pay, mandatory leaves as an option. We continuously revise financial plans and perform scenario-based stress tests on the financial plans that we have based on different scenarios that we are anticipating. An end of the lockdown and extension of the lockdown for what month. So we're looking at that as well. And of course, as a publicly listed company, we constantly are in touch with our investors to be able to manage their expectations. Next.
JJ, 1 minute wrap up, please. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to be doing this wrap up very quickly. Thank you. Next. And then we reduce execo meeting. We have daily execo meetings. We empower our managers on the ground, and we constantly communicate with them. Next. In terms of strategy, can you please pull that up again? Okay, we monitor competitor actions. We identify collaboration. We have our strategic plans have shorter time horizons now and have a strong execution bias. We have new channels. We're looking at new delivery models. We're technology enabled. We are adjusting organization structure. Our human resources and capabilities mix also is being reviewed. We are preparing for bold moves and to implement learnings with regards to business model innovation. And final slide is my conclusion slide. Thank you. There will always be risk, and it will come from varying forms to severity. So we need to constantly update our BCP. Consumer behavior and preferences will change, and so will the regulatory environment. We expect it to be tightened. We're working remotely now. It's going to be part of a new order. As Mrs. G, we're looking at new team structures, new demands from leadership, new technology, and new rules on performance management. We want to build an agile business model, omni-channeling, how to compete in digital age. We constantly reframe our understanding of the current situation. We reflect on what we've learned and how to inform and how this is to inform the strategic and operational decisions. And we are preparing for the next crisis. So at the end of the day, the mantra is how to keep our people safe, but at the same time keep the lights on. So that's what we're struggling with right now. I'm running out of time, but thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, JJ. The next presentation is the concerns of SMEs in battling COVID-19. Our last but not the least speaker is currently the Chair and CEO, Maybridge Finance and Leasing. As we all know, he is the former president of MAP, former president of Philippine Veterans Bank, former president and CEO of China Trust, former senior executive vice president and COO of Philippine Savings Bank or PS Bank, and former country consumer banking head of the Standard Chartered Bank. Let us all welcome MAP past president Joey A. Morbudes, dialing in right now from Toronto, Canada. Over to you, Joey.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you to all of you who are participating. It's a very nice feeling to be attending an MAP event again after 10 years. But I've been dividing my time between Manila and the Philippines because of my company in the Philippines, which is a finance company that's lending to small and medium enterprises. So my assignment today is SMEs. I have taken the liberty to expand the assignment to include micro enterprises. So you would see I'm using the term MSMEs for micro, small, and medium enterprises. First, we need to characterize a bit SMEs for perspective. whether you're talking about the Philippines or Japan or Thailand or Malaysia, it's the same thing. SMEs comprise 98% of all enterprises and practically 60 to 70% of the workforce. And the Philippines mirrors that situation in Asia. And Philippine SMEs contribute about 35% of Philippine GDP. And in the Philippines, there is a legal definition for SMEs, and that is, these are companies that have assets of not more than 100 million. In 2018, there were about 998,000 or almost a million MSMEs, which accounted for more than 99% of all enterprises. And in 2019, loans granted by banks to MSMEs amounted to about 579 billion. I apologize if my slides are not keeping up. But let me proceed anyway. Let me briefly compare the tragedy of COVID-19 with the crisis in 1997 and 2008. These were the two major crises in my lifetime that to me were life-changing. There are three distinct differences I can see and one big similarity. The three distinct differences would pertain to the nature of the crisis. In 1997 and 2008, we were dealing with a man-made crisis that built up over time. Today, we're dealing with a medical crisis that is now morphing into an economic crisis. In 1997 and 2008, the direct impact was a financially calculable damage, calculable within weeks. But today, we're dealing with damage that is on human lives, not just the economy, and which defies calculation months after it has started. And during the two financial crises of 97 and 2008, the economy, even if it is weakened, just hobbled along. But today, large swaths of the economy and the population have completely stopped. Now, one big similarity between these two is that in both cases, the biggest victims were the poor and the MSMEs. It needs to be pointed out that while large companies are worried about major losses arising from this crisis, MSMEs are not worried about major losses. They are worried about survival. Restricted mobility is crippling the supply chain. At the same time, it is leading to effective suppression of demand. You know, when people cannot go out of their houses to spend, to buy what they want, even if they have purchasing power, demand is artificially suppressed. But this demand suppression and the restricted ability of the supply chain to deliver are both going to give rise to significant job losses and probably business failures among MSMEs in particular. At least one operating cycle has already been lost by businesses today with economic shutdown. Now, depending on your cash cycle and your annual turnover, you may have lost already 2 operating cycles by today. But just to give you a perspective, if your turnover is 12 times a year or monthly or every 30 days, then by now you would have lost 8% of your expected annual revenues. So you can see that now, more than ever, MSMEs need liquidity. And I dare say if lenders, and that's the financial institutions, pull the plug today, as many of them did in 1997, out of unwarranted panic, COVID-19 will be as much an economic catastrophe as it is a human tragedy. Let me speak a little bit about how MSMEs are fighting back. This is a matter of survival for MSMEs. So surviving with judicious use of capital is the key. Most MSMEs today are operating with optimal bare bones spending, realignment of budgets in favor of most urgent needs. And MSMEs today are now more open to resource sharing and complementation with friendly companies. This is one thing that my company is doing. One thing that we copied actually from a company in Malaysia that's responding to the COVID crisis as well, where platforms of 2 companies or 3 companies are shared for the purpose of optimizing utilization of manpower and resources. And you do this with friendly companies, those that you complement with, preferably with business partners with whom you're already comfortable. The second priority, or the next most important priority, is the protection of the most valuable assets of the company. And this is to preserve enterprise value. Keeping the employees healthy is priority. It's top priority. Helping business partners and key customers do the same is very important. It is essential for an MSME to believe that it will get through this crisis. And it is important that when this crisis is over, the MSME has a business to go back to. And of course, MSMEs have to avoid a total shutout. To the extent possible, the business must continue using whatever means possible, including the expanded use of technology. Of course, we all know that MSMEs make very few investments or little investments in technology, at least not as much as the large companies do, but they still use technology just the same. And today, technology is no longer the exclusive space of the millennials. It is as well a space that's shared by much older generations, simply because they are forced to. Important also is employee engagement. And this only becomes possible in a shutdown situation via digital communication, which is being intensified to sustain employee morale. One example of this is what we do in our own office in Manila, which is an SME finance company actually. One of our employees developed an online game that we can all play after our weekly online ManCom, an online staff meeting. And that has expanded since to already include as participants and players in that online game other companies, especially our business partners who are sharing the same problems of morale and the same problems and the same worries about whether we will survive or not this pandemic. And while we are grappling with the issue of survival today, it is important that MSMEs also prepare for a post-COVID environment. It is important today to keep the supply chain and the network of business partners warm and alive. And this lull is a good opportunity for us to retrain and retool employees to do those things that we've been putting off because we didn't have time and because we were busy with current imperatives. Like in our company today, we are reviewing current processes and tweaking the operating platform to adapt to new working paradigms. This pandemic has taught us a lot of things, especially working from home, especially maximizing digital technology to communicate. And while these are measures that we have undertaken to respond to an emergency, it is not far-fetched that we may eventually adopt some of these paradigms in the post-COVID era. In other words, we may, for that matter, decide that 80% of our staff meetings and working meetings will already be online. We may also decide that we will continue to collaborate online with business partners. So engaging with funders and stockholders with the end in view of ensuring a smooth return to normalcy post-COVID is important to us. We are busy these days speaking to our lenders to our funders, and to our stockholders to get their full support as we go through this crisis. We are a finance company. We also lend. Our borrowers have come to us and have asked that we be more lenient to them as far as repayment terms are concerned. And we have been open to that. And we expect that our funders and our lenders are going to be as open as we have been to our own borrowers. Now, I've been asked to tackle a bit my own insights on how MSMEs today can be helped. This is what various institutions can do for MSMEs. For financial institutions, the important thing is they do not pull the plug on borrowers who had performed well pre-COVID era and whose businesses continue to be sound. It is also important for them to recognize the restrictions on our mobility today and therefore to relax some of the documentation requirements during the shutdown period. I am sure that the regulators and the BSP will not be taking them to task if they find out that documentation has been less than tight, simply because people were adjusting to mobility restrictions. To large companies, one help that can be extended to MSMEs is to settle their payables expeditiously. I know that there are standard terms. There are agreed terms. Maybe the agreement was 30 days. Maybe the agreement was 60 days. But we are living in extraordinary times. This is not the time to just stick to regular agreements. This is a time to bend over and consider long-term relationships. If possible, in fact, large companies can provide advances to MSMEs that are part of their supply chain, especially those MSMEs with historically good performance. From government, I hope that the Philippine government can provide what the two governments in North America have done, which is provide a wage subsidy to companies that commit not to lay off employees. In Canada and the US, companies are being paid by government 75% of their payroll just to make sure that they do not fire their employees, just to make sure that employees will stay home. In other words, they're paying employees to stay home. And that is one way we can keep employment up. We can retain our employees so that when the situation normalizes, our organization will be intact and we can go back to business right away. Government can also provide MSMEs a one-year relief from bureaucratic burden. For example, same-day approval of business permits and regulatory clearances. After this crisis, MSMEs will be so busy trying to recover and bounce back. And it will help a lot if they're going to be freed from bureaucratic burden. It is also going to be very helpful if MSMEs will be given a one-year reprieve from tax audits. Some call it tax harassment. But if MSMEs did not have to worry about spending a lot of time and giving a lot of attention responding to tax examinations, then they will have more time to focus on recovery, on bouncing back. And lastly, I believe that government should put up a recovery fund for MSMEs. This recovery fund can take many forms. It can be a sovereign bond that is issued to overseas Filipinos. Will the overseas Filipinos have the appetite and the money to do it? Why not? Thus far, when we think about overseas Filipinos, we think about the temporary foreign workers. But bear in mind that there are immigrants. Out of the 10.2 million Filipinos that are abroad, 6 million are immigrants. Filipinos who have taken up citizenships in their own host countries, and Filipinos who have become permanent residents in those countries. Thus far, we've only been measuring what these Filipinos send to the Philippines, and that is $32 billion a year. What we do not know is how much they do not send. These Filipinos never get to know that Ayala issues a dollar-denominated bond, that there is a new ROP issue, that there's a new AAA bond that's being issued by a Philippine corporate. They never find out. And even if they do find out, they're not able to transact because they do not have settlements account in the Philippines. Now, if government decides to issue a sovereign bond, primarily to support MSMEs, then I think these Filipinos will very well take to that bond. Now, I know that government today is watching its fiscal position. And I'm sure government does not want that whatever stimulus it puts together today is going to permanently drain its coffers and result in a long-term problem as far as the deficit to GDP ratio is concerned. So there are many ways of raising funding, even from overseas Filipinos. For example, a private bond issue that contains a 30% first loss guarantee by government is going to be acceptable to many overseas Filipinos. So at this time, I think overseas Filipinos can be called upon to help. If you recall, in 1997 and in 2008, there were dire predictions of overseas Filipino remittances falling substantially and significantly because Filipinos were working in countries or living in countries that were themselves suffering. But we all know that did not happen. We all know that in 2008, Filipino remittances into the Philippines even increased, which goes to show that in times like this, you can rely on them. They may have become American citizens. They may have become Australians, Canadians, Italians, but they're Filipinos. And I think they themselves recognize that fact. So if government can be convinced to work on a recovery fund, then overseas Filipinos can be counted on. How much do I think can be raised from a fund like this through the issuance of an instrument that's backed by a portfolio of very good SME loans? I think 500 million to 1 billion pesos is doable in North America alone. We've done the numbers, we've looked at the potential, and we're very confident that this can be done. And we'd be very much willing to help if government decides to do this. Now, before I close, let me just go back to a slide. Let me request the MAP Secretariat to go back to the graph, the graphical illustration of the liquidity impact on MSMEs. There. Another click, there. Okay, take a look at this chart and see how the loss of liquidity when the plug is pulled by those who provide liquidity can erode capital and can result in losses. I was hoping I could do the animation for this slide. Oh, yes, I can. Okay. A company, an MSME starts with capital from the stockholders. And then, sorry. This is what a company starts with, capital. It invests the capital in operations. When you operate, you have fixed cost. It's represented by your red line. And then you leverage your capital. You go to a lender, lender 1. And then you go to a lender 2. Okay, so the green and the yellow boxes tell you the scale of operations that's possible if you're able to leverage your capital 2 times. Lender 1, lender 2, providing as much money as the shareholders themselves. Now, if you remove lender 1 from the equation, then the operating scale or the annual turnover of the company is going to be substantially reduced. If you remove lender 1, then the company is not even going to be able to operate, or at least if at all operate only minimally, because there's no working capital to speak of. But even if there's no operation, if there is no turnover for a particular period, you still have the red box, which is the fixed cost. And this red box needs to be paid, whether you're operating or not. You have employees, you pay rent, you have utilities, you have depreciation, you have amortization, you have all of these things that a going concern needs to worry about. But look at how the red box relates to your capital. The moment you put out money for that red box, then your capital is reduced to a very minimal sum. Okay, that is how liquidity or the loss of liquidity can erode capital, can force a company to pull back on its operating scale, and in the process, as it loses capital, then the whole economy suffers. Imagine 1 million MSMEs losing capital and not being able to operate. Of course, one might say, well, there are new players who are going to come in to replace them. But imagine the disruption that's going to be caused. If every time liquidity is pulled out by those who are supposed to assist MSMEs, operating scale gets substantially reduced. There are 1 million MSMEs, as I had mentioned earlier, and my friend Charlie describes them as the backbone of the supply chain. So anywhere you look in the supply chain, at any layer, at any end, the front or the tail, you find MSMEs. So that's how important they are to the economy. And remember, they account for 60 to 70% of employment. Take them out. Maybe in terms of value, economic value generated, your loss is not going to be equivalent to 99%, which is what the ratio of MSME to total number of companies. But
Last minute, Joey.
the damage to the economy is going to be very substantial. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Joey. JJ and Third, very insightful. I'd like to take up a few questions from the floor. I think we have a few remaining time to answer and let the speakers respond to possible questions. I understand that they may not have all of the answers for all of your questions, but still we will try to list them down, give it back to them, and hopefully we could hear from them, based on the question that they're actually going to share. Additionally, there were questions about if the slides are going to be available. I've secured, a go signal from Third and JJ, and I think Joey would be able to share a few of those slides. I see the nod. Okay, so all of these slides will be coursed through Arnold, and Arnold will do the necessary from the MAP Secretariat. I will actually start off. I'd like to take any questions at the moment. If there's a particular question that is actually, that you guys actually wanted to raise up. We've received a few direct questions, chat, sent to us confidentially. So we would like to actually prioritize them based on, no prioritization, but we can actually answer some of these questions. So I have a question for JJ, just to get the things ball rolling. JJ, a lot of things are very dependent on your industry, retail sector. What do you observe as changes in behavior happening right now? And what are we going to expect?
Well, basically the changes are in the preferences. Now people are moving towards buying the essentials and less on the on the non-essentials. So really, the back to basics is the one that we're seeing a lot right now. No, so the luxury items are gone. You know, even the premium sardines you're not moving as fast. But really, it's really going back to the basics. So the consumption, the assortment will be changing. The manner of consumption. There's a lot of demand for deliveries, for online. So even the channels are changing as well.
Thank you, JJ. For Joey, you've got great suggestions about MSME. For us, coming from the business sector organization, how may we encourage the government to take this action?
I think government does not even need convincing. If I read the statements of the Secretary of Finance, right? He was saying, except for the fact that the priority now is saving the workers, we are definitely looking at helping companies. So it's just a matter of priority. So employees today, but pretty soon the companies as well. So I do not know what the mechanisms are going to be for helping the companies, but I think a recovery fund is going to be a very useful one.
Thank you, Joey. Something up for third. Third, it was a great presentation. What are some of your suggestions that you can give for companies that are considered non-essentials? How can they survive, during the quarantine? A lot of these are also coming from the service sector, as you probably would know. How can they strategize post-COVID-19 when they won't be the initial priority?
Well, if we follow the framework, really, I think you need to understand, based on your own assessments, what the demand is going to be like. So there were questions on behavior. So do you think that after the crisis, is the behavior going to change in relation to what you sell? So yun yung overarching assessment that you need to make. And then once you've made that assessment, I think it follows, what do I do now? So if I think there's still that opportunity going forward, right? Can I stop, suspend my business now, preserve what I can? Maraming implications yun, of course. Can I stop it now and then continue when the time is right? Kaya ba yun? Can I do that? Alternatively, is it possible to repurpose? I don't know, no? So it really depends, on what the business is. But for instance, in the US, diba, I think the automotive companies, so obviously a lot of people are not buying cars now, diba? So automobile companies have been manufacturing things like medical PPEs, those masks, what do you call this? Those shields, face shields that doctors need. So is that a potential business in the future? I don't know. Can you use your existing machinery for these things? So yun, mga ganong. If it's services, like for instance, in our case, we're a professional services firm. A lot of us are CPAs, so there's a lot of flexibility in what we can provide. In other services, that might be a challenge, right? So, but so those are the options that are available for a business that is considered non-essential.
Questions being raised here that I'm actually reading, basically on the area of price controls. Sabi nila yung sardinas 17 pesos before, now it's actually 25 pesos. And it seems like nobody is controlling the spike of and the huge spike of prices that we actually see right now on stores. Anybody could answer this, but how can we actually address this?
I'll take that, Charlie. Any retailer that is not following the price freeze policy of DTI is actually running the risk of, getting sanctioned. No? So it now is really dependent now on that retailer. Enforcement remains to be a challenge, I suppose. It will be a challenge for us because as a policy of the board, it is very clear for us to adhere to price freezes on identified commodities. No, there are certain commodities that are out of that basket that any retailer would have no choice but to raise because the prices, the cost to acquire them has also increased. And to protect, even in that context, we are reducing the margins. No, again, it is now based on the risk thresholds of those retailers, and many of these price fees are not really respected by tier 2 or the smaller retailers, because big retailers like us, we have undercover DTI people walking our stores many times a day, and also based on our value system as an organization, we really adhere to those price freezes. Again, let's understand that the price freeze is limited to a certain basket of goods.
Time for one or two maximum question. I like to read from some notes that was passed on to me just a few seconds ago. Question for Joey. Our MAP Man of the Year has a famous quote. Banks are from Mars, SMEs are from Venus, suggesting the growing disconnect between the two. How now, as financial intermediaries, do we convince banks to further increase our credit lines for SMEs?
I can relate to that, having been on both sides of the fence. In fact, when we put up our company, our vision is to bridge the great financial divide. That is what we always say. But I think this is not going to be an easy problem to deal with. It's going to be a long process. I think regulators, banks, the business sector all have to come together and understand exactly how to deal with certain risks and not to carry regulation to one extreme. When I was a banker, I would always calculate the cost of compliance. So, which is roughly certain items that I put together in a basket divided by the balance sheet of my bank. And in certain iterations, the percentage I would arrive at was like 4.5% to 5%, which is high. So you may be accusing the banks of, picking up current accounts only at 1% and then lending it at 7%. But you're omitting the fact that there is this compliance cost that they need to deal with. So I think it is not only just the banks and the business sector that must work together. The regulators must come in as well and help.
Ask one question, and I want to give a few seconds for the speakers to respond to this. What is your take about how long should the lockdown be, and any parting words for the audience? While you're thinking, I like to read an input suggestion coming from the member. One input suggestion is suggest MAP concretize the recommendations for BSP, BIR, BAP, and other government agency relaxations and assistance, and get other associations to join us. That's an input that I just wanted to read, but I wanted to take the time actually before we close to give Third, JJ, and Joey to do their wrap up comments. Over to you, Third.
Am I on mute? Okay.
Yes, you're on.
Sorry. So to wrap up, so I guess I'd just like to thank everyone for this opportunity, and I hope you were able to take away some things from my presentation, and also and that you can use in your particular circumstances. No? Again, liquidity is key at this time, and you know, you do what you can, no, to preserve and protect cash. Thank you.
JJ, please unmute.
Okay. Well, but my final words really is that we, at least in Metro, believe this won't be the last. We hope it's the last, but it really won't be the last. So we felt as a parting shot as well that it's very important for organizations to build resiliency into the business model. No? Flexibility, adaptability, creativity, and more importantly, the ability to move quickly. So it's important to make sure that our people are safe and how to keep them safe in imperfect, using imperfect information. But at the end of the day, there's still a business to run. So the new world order is defined by these uncertainties. And so we should build resiliency into that. So thank you very much. And I hope I was able to share some insights for you to take home.
Thank you. Thank you, JJ. And over to you, Joey.
In response to that question about how long the lockdown ought to be, I believe we will have to leave it to the experts. And to a large extent, the length of the lockdown is going to be determined by the virus, not by anyone else, not by any one of us. But I just hope, I just wish our leaders well, and I wish them the best as they try to do this balancing act, to weigh all of these trade-offs when they need to decide whether to lift the shutdown or not. Now, with respect to that suggestion about concretizing the proposals, I agree wholeheartedly with that. And if I may suggest, as a business organization, when we send something to government, I think we must approximate the standards of CSW, or completed staff work. In other words, it may have to be a lot more meaty and substantive than just a two-page resolution of the business organizations, but something that almost brings them to the point where they only need to say yes or no. And if they say yes, then that document becomes operative. Of course, I would be naive to think that they will go with that entire document that we prepared, but at least there's going to be less work for them to do. And hopefully, there will be more appetite for them to listen to us.
Charlie, you're on mute.
Okay. Before I actually finally close the session, I'd like to personally thank Francis Lim, Marivic Espano, and all of the MAP Board of Directors for accepting the offer of the Procurement and Supply Institute of Asia on the Supply Chain National Pandemic Supply Chain Integrated Program that were actually presented. A lot of the information and the inputs that I've heard is pretty much referring to a lot of supply chain work that needs to be done. So thank you for that. We've been working with that for the last month or so, and finally it got heard, and we're actually moving in with our inputs. In behalf of everybody, this was the first breakthrough that we did in MAP Trade, Industry, and Tourism. This is the first MAP wide, Zoom online meeting. I saw it actually move excellently. I hope you would like this. And we would like to hold series of this thing going forward from here on. I've never seen a Viber group that is as active as MAP. And if you are not there, I think you should join the Viber group. It's a very exciting platform and forum that you wouldn't like to miss. So we're actually moving on with several of these online forums, and we would like to hear from you. According to Governor Marivic Espano, we would like to hear more topics that you would like to hear from us. And not only topics, we would like to hear who are your suggested speakers that can actually share their inputs so that we can continuously. Mahirap masyado yung Viber, masyadong mahirap din yung nag-i-stay tayo sa mga bahay natin. I think seeing you online, maybe at some point in time, we're gonna have a screenshot of everybody online, showing themselves up, in this particular Zoom online meeting. Any closing remarks from Francis or inputs from Marivic? I'd like to, open it up for you, just in case you have something to say, Francis.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody, to the members who took their time attending this first ever webinar. As Marivic and Charlie said, we will continue with the series, especially during the lockdown. And I reiterate Marivic's request that if you have any topics worth discussing, as stated by Charlie, please do let us know, and we will try our best to accommodate those topics in the webinars to come. It's a tough time for business, for us personally, for our families, but I think we have to keep stock of things, and let's hope for the best. Let's keep our fingers crossed and keep on praying. Thank you very much.
Marivic?
Okay, I was reading some of the questions, and maybe as a word of advice, I would just like to encourage everyone, if you have problems with your, with your suppliers or with your banks, the best advice would be to ask them. Okay, the worst that you can get is a no, but if you don't ask them, then you'll never know the answers. We've experienced such situations in the past few days. Minsan sasabihin sa amin, it's not possible, but you go and look for the right person. Don't just rely on the account officer. Look for the, look for the department head. If you're talking about banks, go to the right person. Similarly, for rents or other suppliers, talk to the business owners because they would understand you. We are all in the same situation. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you very much, everybody. I'd like to put the online meeting now, first ever, into an end. Take care and God bless everybody.
Thank you.
Speakers, please stay for our group selfie. Okay, Arnold, take over our group selfie.
Okay, Joanna will do it.
History in the making. Okay.
Okay, so till the next webinar.
Yes, till the next. We will come.
Yes, Francis?
Just taking our selfie, I just received 2 bills from on the recovery stimulus plan. I'll study them right after this meeting. I think, as Marivic knows and as everyone knows, a stimulus package, we have been championing that from day one, in addition to the amelioration fund. And so far as the suggestion to concretize our recommendations to the BIR and to the other government agencies, take note of that, Arnold, so that we can make a public statement, try to tag other groups into that. There are many proposals now from other business groups, and I think it's about time. We get about 30 business groups again, whatever that we may have in mind.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you, Francis. Thank you, Charlie, and thank you all to our speakers.
Thank you, MEP. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well done. Congratulations.
Stay safe, Joey. Bye-bye.
Arnold, thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.